Wait a minute. Hey folks, it's John with KGTropicals.com. Really excited to be bringing back the Q&A format. I've got about 4 questions for you today. Really excited about it. And the questions today, 3 of them have to do with wild-caught fish. So if you've ever had any interest in wild-caught fish and what's involved with all of that, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that. But we do have one before that that talks a little bit about water changes. But if you're not familiar with this series of videos that I'm doing, I've done a lot of them in the past and then we kind of got away from it, but now I'm back to doing it again. If you want to get a question submitted for this series, send it in to that email address right there, and it can be absolutely about anything. I did include a couple of rules in the last episode. I'm not going to go through all of that again, but if you haven't seen it, go back and watch last week's episode and you'll see where I talked about the things that you really can't ask about. And there's not that many, but there is a couple of things that I kind of put off limits, even though in the comment section for that video, there were people that still did it. There were a couple that were joking around, and that was fun, and I enjoyed that, but there was a couple of people that still asked the questions that I told them not to. Sometimes I just can't win. But anyway, let's get to the first question. So recently in the Q&A videos, I always did the videos in front of the computer because I wanted to be able to read the questions from the computer. Obviously, it makes it a little easier. Well, I wanted to switch things up a little bit and change things up. We're here today in front of Lisa's tank. So instead, I'm going to be reading the questions off of my phone. You might see me squinting a little bit to read it because everything's so small. But anyway, I wanted to be able to do these in front of different tanks and different backdrops instead of being the same thing every time. So let's get right in to the first question. It comes from Camilo Geraldo. And the question reads, "Hi John, first that all glad you're back. My question is, what about freezing? Water changes on aquariums. I just made one on my American cichlid tank and they reacted really weird, especially the Jack Dempsey. It just stayed on the gravel hiding on the decor. Is it okay? Because I have seen better results in water clarity with cold water than warmer. I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Aquarium info, blah, 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 blah. Water temperature is way lower than recommended for this kind of fish on this water change." Okay, there's a very good reason why your water is clearer when it's colder. It's because the warmer the water is, the easier it is for algae and things like that to grow. So yeah, it probably is easier to keep your water cleaner if it's cold. But you're torturing your fish. Come on, dude. You got to raise the temperature up in this. I know it's nice to have a clean tank, but it's nice to have happy fish too, right? Now, when it comes to doing water changes, if you want to use cold water when you do your water changes, there's nothing wrong with that unless you're doing a 50% or more water change, because then the overall temperature in the tank is going to be impacted by that. I mean, it's going to change dramatically. But if you're doing a 20-30% water change and you use cold water for that, you should be fine. I actually do that here. My tanks are a mess right now because my hose is buried in the snow outside. I know, irresponsible. But I run my water straight from my outdoor spigot into the tanks. I do that year round. Now, when it's super cold and the water is frigid cold coming out of the spigot, that's what we call it in Virginia, is a spigot, I will do smaller water changes so that I'm not affecting the water temperature overall all that much. Now, in the summertime, when the water's warm, I mean, it's not, hot coming out of the tap, but it's warmer, I'll do much bigger water changes less frequently. But when it comes to cold weather and cold water coming out of the tap, I will do smaller water changes more frequently. I hope that makes sense. But if you're doing this, if you're running your tank all the time, colder, because it's easier to take care of, you're making a mistake. I know it looks better, but you're torturing your fish. I know it's Canada. I mean, I know things are hard to keep warm in Canada no matter what. I get it, but you want to keep your fish warm. There's a reason why they're called tropical fish. So put a heater in there, raise it up, and just deal with the things that happen with a warmer tank, algae, things like that. It'll be much better for your fish. They'll be much happier. The next three questions that we have are going to kind of all work together around the same general topic. Maybe not directly, but you'll see what I mean when I get into it. And they're all about wild caught fish. The first one, not so much, but you'll see how I tie it in there. But we're going to talk about wild caught fish. Now, I'm certainly not an absolute expert on wild caught fish, but I've had plenty of them, and I know people who import wild caught fish. So I know enough about them to where I feel like I can share with you and maybe educate you a little bit on these. So let's go with the first one here, which is from Will H. And he says, how much of a believer are you to sticking to fish's exact water requirements, specifically in terms of water hardness / TDS? I often see people mix and matching, and personally I'm not a huge fan. Also, with the introduction of tap water discus, even if you have hard water. What are your thoughts? Okay, I'm not really sure what the tap water discus thing means. I guess what he's saying is why try to alter your water extensively when these fish are used to tap water. And I guess that's how that whole thing ties in. But look, when it comes to fish keepers, I am of the belief that you've got a couple of different types of people. As it pertains to this question, you've got two different kinds of people. One is the person who goes to the extreme and goes to the expense of trying to replicate what the fish would have if they were in the wild. And that's a good thing. I mean, I'm not trying to talk about that as if it's somehow a bad thing. It's certainly not. But these people will go to extremes and they'll alter their water chemistry and they'll go crazy with it, trying to do what they believe is the right thing for the fish by giving them what they would have if they were in the wild. Okay? Next group of people are people like me. We kind of take the easy route, but at the same time, it's the harder route because what we go for is consistency and cleanliness. We want the fish to, instead of being on a roller coaster where the pH and the hardness and everything is going up and down, we would rather have it consistent all the way across the board. And we find that our fish appreciate that more, again, rather than being on that roller coaster. I don't think either approach is wrong. I really don't. I think it's all up to you and what you're trying to do. I also feel like it's absolutely impossible and it's a complete waste of time to try to replicate nature in a glass box. So that's why I don't do that. I try to stick more with consistency. And I think that you're going to find that most advanced fish keepers will tell you consistency is the key. So I've read that and learned that and been told that for 20-something years, that consistency is more important than anything else. So that's kind of what I've gone by, and I've been that way all along. Keeping it simple, keeping it consistent, that's what I like to stick with. Now, everything changes about this conversation when you're talking about wild caught fish, because wild caught fish are plucked from the lakes or from the rivers, they're brought in, and they're put into your tank, into a completely new environment, into water that they're not used to. And that is different. When it comes to that, you are going to want to have your tank, the water parameters in your tank, absolutely as close to what they would have had in the wild, because you don't want to shock them too much. You don't want to try to adjust them to our tap water. Now, 95, it might even be a higher percent, 95% of the fish that you're going to find in your local pet store or in your big box store or whatever are going to be farm-raised fish, which means they were raised in tanks or vats. They've never seen the wild. They don't know what the wild water parameters are like, and they've adjusted to that. They were born in that and raised in that. I've been to farms. I've seen these facilities. They're not doing things to drastically alter their water parameters. Usually what you'll find is the type of fish that they're breeding or they're keeping are fish that go well in that farm's water straight out of the tap or straight out of the well or whatever it is. This is why Homestead is such a big place for breeding and keeping African cichlids, because the water out of the wells there is ideal for keeping African cichlids. So they're not adjusting it. You know, what you get out of the tap at these farms is what these fish are raised in. So when you bring them into your tanks, more than likely your water is closer to their water at the farms than it is the wild. You understand what I'm saying here? But these fish have been raised in that, so they don't know any difference. So I'm completely rambling. If you are someone who brings in wild caught fish, that's cool, but understand that you're gonna want to get your water as close as possible to what they would have from the lake that you just pulled them from, which is so sad. If you're someone who's buying fish from a pet store that is not wild caught, they're gonna be fine in tap water for the most part. You may need to adjust it a little bit, but just remember that consistency is the key. Okay, so sticking with wild caught, let's go to a question from Matthew Ward. Question reads, "Hi John, I think have a great idea for a Q&A video. For the people out there who are thinking about keeping wild caught African cichlids and the differences in keeping wild caught as opposed to tank bred or farm raised cichlids. How much of a difference really is there? And how does the overall care and water preparation differentiate? Not to mention the quarantine process to begin with. I think this could be an interesting topic for the keeping moving towards wild-caught fish. Thanks, Matt." Okay, so if you're thinking about keeping wild-caught fish, if you've never had them before, I'm not going to give you the definition of what wild-caught fish is because I think that's pretty self-explanatory, but there are a few things, whether you're thinking about keeping wild-caught Africans or anything for that matter, there are a few things to think about. But I want to touch on something that he talked about at the end of his question, which was about the quarantining process. Now, I have been to farms that specialize in wild-caught African cichlids. In particular, Old World Exotics down in Homestead, Florida. Now, they have an entire section of their farm that is dedicated to quarantining wild-caught fish. And there's a specific amount of time that they keep their fish in there before they even make them available for the stores to purchase. So when you talk about quarantining your fish, this is pretty much done for you at the farms, at least if you're getting them from a place that buys their fish from Old World Exotics. They quarantine them there. And from what I understand, it's like 2 to 3 weeks from the time they get brought in from Tanganyika or Malawi, Victoria, whatever, and be released to the pet stores. So the quarantining from wild to tank is already done for you. Now, whether you choose to quarantine them again in your own quarantine setup at your house before you introduce them into your main tank, that's up to you. There's nothing wrong with that. But quarantining them, making sure that they are free from disease and making sure that they adapt well from Africa to here. Usually, I don't know if every farm does this, but I would imagine they do because they have to stand behind their product. They're going to do that for you when they import them. They're not even going to be available to the pet stores for a while. So, you know, that's the quarantining process. I mean, I know Old World Exotics, again, they had a whole room area, a whole rack section, multiple sections that were specifically wild-caught fish. Bring them in, put them in there, monitor them. You know, if they need to be treated, they treat them. They, you know, keep an eye on them before they release them for sale. They're not up for sale right after they come off the boat. So that process is usually done for you. But when you're purchasing wild-caught fish, these are fish that typically are a bit more fragile. Again, because you're taking them from water that they're used to, whether it's Lake Malawi or the Amazon, they're used to their water being a certain way. You're taking them from that and you're putting them into tap water, or even if it's RO water or whatever it is that you have at your house, it's probably going to be very different from what they had in the wild. So there is some trick to it. I don't know if I want to say trick. What I should say is you really do need to understand water chemistry. You need to be not necessarily an expert fish keeper, but you're not going to want to be a beginner. You're going to want to be knowledgeable in what needs to be done to the tank to prepare it for those wild-caught fish. That's what I was looking for right there. So, and again, you're taking a fish from however big the lakes are. I always forget how big Lake Malawi is, for example. You're taking them from that and you're putting them in a little glass box. I've heard so many people say, my fish, I got wild-caught fish and they're so stressed out and they're so stressed out for so long. Well, think about it. Let's use some common sense. You're pulled from paradise and you're put into this little glass box. You'd be a little stressed out too. Plus the water's different, plus everything else. Wouldn't you be stressed? Put into a little closet? This is why I personally, I'm not a huge fan of wild-caught fish. I'm not saying you're a bad person if you keep them, but I'm not a fan of taking fish from their natural environment and plucking them out of there and putting them into your little glass box. Most people don't keep fish in appropriate sized tanks, even the experts. So to have them put into a small glass box, to me, is just cruel. But, you know, I'm crazy that way. Again, you're not a bad person if you keep them. That's fine. If you're willing to go the extra mile to make sure the water's right, and you're willing to pay the extra price tag that is attached to wild-caught fish, more power to you. Have fun. So we have one last question that has to do with wild-caught, but this time it's about discus. At least that's what he mentions specifically in the question. So let's get to it. Melvin Torres says, "Hello, sir. First of all, I would like to let you know how much I enjoy your videos. Very inspirational and educative. Thank you very much. I would like to have a little info on the way we maintain discus. Excuse me if this sounds stupid, but if discus in the wild are most of the discus on the wild, but wait a minute. If discus in the wild or most of the discus on the wild, based on the videos here on YouTube, live in waters that are not super clean, why the need to have a crystal clear water while in fish tanks? I mean, I know they need to have the water clean and all about water changes, but it is a little confusing if you see how most of them live in the wild compared to what most hobbyists tell you about the water quality in fish tanks." Once again, excuse me for the confusing question. Hope you can have a great day. All right, so I'm not going to go all philosophical on you and say there's no such thing as a stupid question, because trust me, there's plenty of stupid questions. But this wasn't one of them, because this is a good question. Because it's true, when you see videos of wild-caught fish, you're going to see water that you're going to think, well, that's not all that clean. But it is. And a lot of videos, you know, I'll give you a great example. Mark Bolton took a trip out to Lake Malawi. I wanted to go so bad. He went out there and he took a ton of footage from underwater. He was scuba diving and had underwater cameras. And let me tell you something, it almost looks like he's floating in air. The water is so crystal clear. Now that's Lake Malawi. Go check his videos out, by the way. Amazing stuff. He's got some in there that are like 45 minutes of just following around one fish. But let me tell you something, I watched every minute of it. I don't know why. Mark, you should put some music in those videos. Come on, dude. But no, they're fascinating to see these fish's behavior in the wild. But anyway, you can see videos of the Amazon and you're like, wow, this is a muddy, scummy river. But really, it's not. I mean, the Amazon is cleaner than you think. A lot of times when you see these videos, they might be down at the surface. You're down there, or whoever took the footage is down there scurrying up the sand, and the sand's all ruffled up. You're spooking the fish and they're swimming away and there's sand flying up. This is what you're seeing that you think is dirty. Believe me, the water's not dirty. I mean, it's maybe not something you would want to take a drink out of, probably like Malawi, but in the Amazon, I don't know if I would do that, because I've heard of the things that happen in that river. But the water's cleaner than you think, because it's cleaned by the best filter on the planet, and that is the planet. It's nature. It's absolutely the best filter that there is. So the water's a lot cleaner than you might think. There might be dust particles and sand particles flying all over the place, but it's not dirty water. So again, when you're keeping fish in a glass box, think about it this way. You take a human being who's an outdoorsman, always outside, breathing the fresh air, and it's a beautiful thing, and you stick them into a little sealed-in, airtight room. It's going to be okay for a little while, right? But then what's going to happen? It's going to be hard to breathe. The air is going to get a little scummy. It's going to start to stink because he's pooping and peeing in the spot where he's at. You see where I'm getting with this? After a while, without proper circulation and without the air being filtered through this box, a human being is going to suffocate and die. This is the same thing that would happen in an aquarium. There needs to be circulation. There needs to be oxygenation of the water. The water needs to be circulating and being filtered to keep impurities out and all that kind of stuff. We need to keep control of the environment in that tank, just like we would need to if we were in a sealed up room. If you don't filter the air, you're going to end up suffocating. So I hope that makes sense. I mean, yeah, some of the videos that you see, the water might look a little iffy, but believe me, it's not. It's the best water that they could possibly be in because it's filtered by the planet. So there you go. I want to thank the people that submitted those questions for today's video. This is a lot of fun. These used to take me so long to make these Q&A videos because I would just try to be so methodical and I don't want any mistakes, and if I stutter once, I'm not with that anymore. I'm enjoying more of a laid-back, just casual, kind of have fun with this and go with it. I like it. The videos are probably going to turn out to be a little bit longer, but you know what? I don't care because some of the most watched videos on my channel are Q&A videos like this. So I'm excited. Again, thank you to the people that submitted questions. I got a ton of great questions from last week's video, so hopefully we keep that going, and I've got endless content for future videos. So this was a lot of fun. Hey folks, do me the favor, if you are in the market for African cichlids or unbelievable discus like this, I don't know if they've been hiding through the whole video or what, but unbelievable discus like these, head over to livefishdirect.com, enter Tank Talk into the promo box at checkout. I'm gonna give you 10 bucks off. Come on, the selection over there is absolutely out of control. And if you want one of those fancy 3D backgrounds like you see in my other videos, universalrocks.com, 15% off if you add Tank Talk in the promo box. These people are giving huge discounts to viewers of my videos. Gotta love that. And hey, if you haven't joined the Tank Talk Facebook group yet, head over there. The link is at the top of the description. Check it out. We're having a lot of fun in there. There was a couple of people that kind of bit into me pretty hard last week when I said I answer questions and all. There was a couple of people that wanted to argue with me. We had some problems, but I'm on there all the time. No matter what anybody says, I'm on there all the time. I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to answer every comment and every question. Can't do it. There's hundreds and hundreds of posts on there every single day. Can't promise that, but we just passed 2,000 members in that group, having all kinds of fun. You should come join us. You'll have fun too. So thank you again for watching this video. If you want to get your question answered, you see the email address right down there below. Send it in. Maybe you'll see your question answered next week. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to talking to you again next week.